Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm going to ramble to you a bit about the PS5 version of Devil May Cry 5, because I never played it back when it originally came out, and I figured, what the hell, it's got a couple of neat features I'd like to try out, so I'll give it a go. First thing I'm going to say is that I kind of understand the story, although at the same time I wonder if I don't, because really it can be summed up so simply that it makes me wonder if I've missed anything important. The first half of the story basically revolves around finding out who the big demon is and why he's so strong, and then the second half is kicking the result of that's ass. That's basically the most spoiler-free way I can put the story, and there's almost nothing else to it. The rest of it is style, grace, and some ridiculously funny cutscenes at times. Anytime that goddamn Zuzu from The Lion King shows up next to bloody Adam Driver with a bloody, what's the word I'm looking for? With an emo streak to him, makes me laugh every time, because despite the fact that the story is very thin on the ground, it's always pretty funny, especially when you have the ability to turn on, in the options, the trial cutscenes that they used with real people doing the actions of certain things in the game, and when Zuzu comes on, and it turns out to be this dude just flapping some cardboard wings, I pissed myself laughing. I thought it was fucking hilarious. But unfortunately, that's not the way the story is meant to be presented, and they recommend you don't do it the first time through. So I did it for like a couple of cutscenes and then I stopped. But still, really neat that that's a feature. I don't know why they thought that wouldn't be incredibly embarrassing to the people acting it out, but they did and they did, so okay. So now that I've talked about the story, I'm going to talk about the combat and the gameplay in general, because it's Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry 3, and to be specific, the Special Edition on PlayStation 2, set the bar so goddamn high for what these sorts of games are supposed to be, that it's almost embarrassing when even the game's sequels can't live up to it. It's kind of hilarious in that way, but Devil May Cry 5 does put in a good attempt. I will give it that. It is a good attempt. Did they pull it off? No. that's kind of obvious, not really. But it's alright. I'll give the game a solid B+, where I'd give Devil May Cry 3 an A++, even though I've never actually finished that completely. I have finished this, so the footage that you're watching right now is mostly going to be assorted combat scenarios from chapters 8 through 9. And then at the very end is going to be Nero taking on the first 20 floors of the bloody palace, which I'll get to when I get to, but the gameplay is pretty much the same as it is in Devil May Cry 3. I will point out I've only played Devil May Cry 3. I have not played 4, 2, or 1. So the general idea is you walk through these levels, you beat up any monsters you find along the way, you look for certain secrets like secret missions and so forth, and after that, well, you're basically just living off the combat, which is a series of death-defying combo builders and just general beating the crap out of as many monsters as possible. And you do that through the combo system, where different attacks landed on different enemies are more likely to increase your style meter on the right. It goes from D to triple S. And the more varied hits and the more hits you can string together will bring it up. The more times you get hit, or the longer you let the meter fade out by not hitting attacks or hitting repetitive attacks, it'll go down. The entirety of the satisfaction of Devil May Cry is getting that style meter up as much as humanly possible, because man, it feels good to do it, especially when you just get on that perfect flow. You're evading every attack, you're getting in every single hit that you can, you're gathering everyone together so that you can hit them with AoEs and bring up that style meter massively. And it does help you out because the stages have ranks, which are of course letters, and they'll give you more bonus orbs if you manage to pull it off right. So it's all immensely satisfying when it's right, but there is a different level of satisfaction that is provided depending on who you're playing, because there are 3 different player characters, and I would like to sort them in the order that I enjoyed them from least to most. And we'll start with the first character, who is V, who is should be seeing on the screen right now if I haven't massively fucked up this video render. So V is one of the oddest cases I've ever seen in a game like this, because his entire gameplay style revolves around controlling you as you're wandering around the field, but your buttons order your pets to attack. So you need to use your different pets and their different attacks in order to get the hits down, but you also need to stay out of the way yourself, and you also need to keep your dudes out of the way. You also need to keep your pets out of the way, because they do have their own health bars. You do also have Nightmare, who is basically just, bring him in, he'll destroy everything. You don't even have to worry about his health bar style thing. He's basically just a nuke for the battlefield. That's all he is. And my main problem with V is that, due to the fact that his combat is so hands-off, so to speak, it's nowhere near as satisfying as Nero or Dante, because you're just not in the moment. You're controlling these two pets, and you don't have direct control over these pets. So the way that Devil May Cry controls work is that you hit the attack button, you do an attack. You delay after hitting the attack button for a combo, or you can just smash away for another combo. There are also directions that you can move the analog stick in, so if you hold it back and press the attack button, you'll do a different attack. If you hold it forward and you press the attack button, you'll do a different attack, like that, right? These rules, while simultaneously applying to the way you move, also apply to your pets. So you need to be constantly telling them to go in one direction, and then you need to remember to be moving in a different direction, but if you want them to be using a specific attack, you need to move in another direction in order for them to use that attack. And you just have to keep doing this weird control stick dance, and it's just inherently unsatisfying, because in the attempt to keep my dudes attacking the enemy, I've often found myself way out of the way, and your camera is based on where V is in relation to the target that you're locked onto, which also means that if you end up moving by accident, your directions that you need to put in for certain moves change. It's not it's not like it's not summonable. You can learn this, but it's just not as satisfying to do at the end of the day, because it's just not as hands-on. You really do feel like you're playing Devil May Cry on a 150 millisecond ping connection. I think that's the best comparison I've got for it. You gotta wait for them to do the attacks. Meanwhile, with Nero and Dante, you're more in the moment. You're in direct control of where you move, how you move, and what attacks you're going to put out, while also being able to control yourself at the same time, and not having to worry about 2 extra health bars going off and all that. There are ways around things like, getting your dudes out of the way in a way that's more quick. Like, you do get some extra moves that you can buy later on that involve them, like, dodging you out of the way or picking you up and, like, gliding along with the cat and the bird, respectively. So you can use those moves to get them out of the way, which helps the situation somewhat. But that also means you have to talk about the way that the moves are upgraded in Devil May Cry, which is via the red orbs, which are everywhere, but all your abilities are actually a fair bit more expensive this time around, so you need to be really searching for them. Everybody has tons of upgradable abilities, and the only thing that really annoys me about the need to upgrade is that they hold off the weirdest shit from you. My least favorite being that every character needs to spend 5,000 orbs to know how to fucking sprint. Now that's ridiculous. There are plenty of actual moves for you to learn, but when you have to go that far, I think it's a bit much. There are also other upgrades you can get. Health, your Devil Trigger, which is basically your rage mode, do more damage, get your health back and stuff like that. And it's fun trying to, just balance all of this ridiculous crap on top of these ridiculous cutscenes. I'm just saying, it's just a bit much sometimes when you have to buy the ability to fucking sprint. It just doesn't make any sense to me, man.
Impressive.
There's also a second problem I have with V. He's too easy. He's really button mashy, even by the regular standards. Well, not so much the regular standards of Devil May Cry, because if you button mash on higher difficulties, you're screwed. There is no way that you're going to get through it alive. It's not a game that you can button mash. But playing through the main story on the only difficulty I had unlocked at the time, which was not the legendary Devil Hunter difficulty, which is very clearly intended for experts, and considering the fact that I haven't even played this game before, I wasn't going to touch that. It just seems like it's just a bit too simple to play as V sometimes. I could not tell you why they made him as easy as they did. Maybe they had to compensate a bit because you really don't have direct control over all your attacks, but yeah, V just kind of gets the short end of the stick in everything, because his final encounter is, to put it simply, 3 bosses from the game that you've already beat, but they're weaker, and you don't get access to all 3 of your dudes at one time. You have to pick the bird, the cat, or the Nightmare. And if you, when you have to pick one, then you have to pick two, then you have to pick three for the last boss, and then the last boss is just so incredibly easy that it just turns into a button mash fest, and that's the last time you see V in the entire game. It's just down to Dante and Nero, and it makes him feel surprisingly undercooked. Like, they might have had something going here, but the lack of responsiveness in comparison to the other two characters, and the fact that he's just as easy as he is, means that he's just not as enjoyable as a result. Then we move on to Nero, and not Nero actually, that's not right. Let's move on to Dante, because Nero was actually my favorite. But Dante plays a lot like he does in Devil May Cry 3. He's got a fair amount of the same weapons, the same combos. He's got his Devil Trigger, he's got a new Sin Devil Trigger, which makes him even stronger than the regular Devil Trigger, but instead it just kinda makes, it doesn't take away, it doesn't add health back, which is a little weird, but it also doesn't mean that you have to really throw caution to the wind if you're fighting anything except the last couple of bosses, because you would do a ridiculous amount of damage and tons of stun locking. So yeah, it's just a more powerful form of Devil Trigger. He's got a couple of new weapons, the hat that throws out red orbs, and like two halves of a freaking motorbike, but they're just kinda Like, I didn't really like them. They were both a bit too slow and a bit too unsatisfying for me. Especially the bloody two-ended motorbike. It's big and it's flashy, but man, it's not satisfying to use at all. And he's got his two handguns, Ebony and Ivory. He's got his rocket launcher, his shotgun, which are all useful for different kinds of enemies. You've also got different weapons that you can use. You've got your Cerberus nunchuck things that can also morph into different things. You've got your gauntlets that can do kicks. And of course, you've got the regular old-fashioned sword with all the usual combos with that you're used to. And he's fun, but there's just a couple of things that make him not as interesting as I would have hoped. Mainly because he's still got all of his styles, but some of the styles just aren't as useful. You got Trickster, which lets you dodge around and do a few fancy things like that in order to close the gap or get out of the way of attacks. You've got Swordmaster, which adds a bunch of useful sword attacks that can really add to your combo. You've got Gunmaster, which can help you fire a lot more bullets than you normally would. And then you've got your Royal Guard, which will let you block and take a lot less damage, but deal some damage back. And the problem is you have to upgrade all of these styles manually, not to mention all of his weapons manually. And it costs a hell of a lot of red orbs. This is a game that is well and truly meant for multiple playthroughs of the story mode, multiple playthroughs of Bloody Palace, and a lot of stuff along those lines. And as a result, he just doesn't really feel complete. It feels like you're stuck with a lot of the basic combos and a lot of just, like, not so much of an idea of how the character is really supposed to be played right up until you've finished. And even then, bloody Nero still feels more engaging than him. And that's kind of a problem, at least in my point of view, because I'm first impressions. I like to play a game for a couple of hours and really get like a good sense of what's going on. And I feel like that someone who comes in and plays Dante and realizes he's so incomplete with a complete lack of combos and what have you, especially when you've been playing as Nero and V the entire time, and you've had time to learn their movesets, going back to him when he feels so strangely incomplete is just a bit of a bore. Especially when his weapons get... the rest of his weapons, I should say, only get dumped on him right at the very end, and it means it's kind of disappointing to play as him, just because it's so weird that he forgot all the shit he knew. Again, it's the Metroid problem, where in order to make a decent upgrade system, they've made it so that you had to forget literally everything you knew. And as a result, all the way through this game, I felt like, at least when he comes up, he doesn't come in until like chapter 10 or so, it feels like that he's just undercooked. Nero, on the other hand, is a lot more enjoyable, because he's got a lot of his tricks right out of the gate. The main thing being his right arm, which is a swappable attack weapon of some kind. I'm not entirely sure what you would call this kind of weaponry. But his arm is switchable, and it has a regular attack, but it also has a grappling hook which can get you in closer, and you can also burn off an arm for a massive amount of damage. If you're also an idiot and let out attacks right before you get hit, it'll destroy one of your arms, so you have to be careful about using that as well. He's also got the ability to charge up his sword for some extra attacks, his gun can be charged up for explosive bullets, and these all take very little time to at least get started with, so you have a really good idea of how Nero is going to play all the way through the game. Then, during the fucking credits, he gets his devil trigger, which annoyed the hell out of me because it adds another whole dimension to the way he fucking plays, which is just so weird when he plays so well to begin with. I enjoyed the hell every time I was playing with Nero because having all the arms available to you, because you can carry it 4 to start with, I think, but you can upgrade that to be something like 8. So you can have a ridiculous amount of different strategies available to you at any one time. Although, that entire point is kind of moot when you realise that you're not going to know what most of the game has in store for you anyway, so it's only really useful for going to S ranks on the single player missions, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But as a result, I love playing as him. His sword combos are really fun to do. He's got plenty of air maneuverability. All his different arms give him different tactics in whatever the hell that you're up to in the game at that point. And he's just a ball to play with. Is this what he's like in, like, minus the arms? Is this what he's like in 4? Because I have, like, 2 copies of Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition that I've just never touched. And I really need to get around to it now that I've enjoyed Nero so much. Although, I've heard that he's a bit of a carbon copy of Dante in Devil May Cry 4. So I'm not going to claim to know if I'm going to enjoy him as much. But I gotta tell you, actually having the Mega Buster be a useful weapon in this game is just freaking weird, but it works, and I enjoy the hell out of playing as Nero. And if you were able to play the entire game as him, I'd probably recommend the game outright just because he's that much fun to play with. Unfortunately, you have to kind of swap between missions as you go between the characters in question. You do have the opportunity to pick what character you want from time to time, but it's like 2 out of 3 missions out of 20. So there's very little you can do in order to actively play as the guy you want all the way through. And that's kind of the disappointing thing about the way the story is structured. The missions are also not that great either in their structure. The fights are great. They introduce new enemies all the way up through to the end of the game, and the bosses are huge. They're really fun to fight, and they all need some real good strategies going on. I just gotta say, though, that I kind of hate the way these levels are laid out, because they all look so cramped and crowded that it looks like you could hide shit behind a wall, or just have a corner be completely invisible to you just because of all the crap that's around the level, and just a bunch of level design things like that just really piss me off. And it's because there's secret missions in this game where you have to do things like defeat all the enemies without getting hit, don't touch the ground, beat all of these enemies in 15 seconds. It means that you have to be looking around these levels really carefully in order to find this shit, and it's kind of doubled down on, again, with V, because V always gets a short end of the stick with this, where V always needs to break down a fucking wall with Nightmare, which requires a bar of Devil Trigger, which requires some planning ahead, except you might have the bad luck to not notice what wall you need to actually break down, and it just becomes an absolute nightmare to find secret missions with him. At least with Nero and Dante, you don't have to go breaking down walls and shit to do that, which just annoys the crap out of me to no end. Then again, I guess it's not as bad as Devil May Cry 3, where you have to actively press walls that look like they have nothing special about them whatsoever, except maybe they look like a door. But there are so many, like, random doors, also bug there, that there's so many random doors that are in the wall that look like you'd interact with them, but you just don't. It's weird. Just don't ask. But yeah. Level design, not that big of a fan, especially when it comes to some of the bosses that just kind of exploit it, so you have to be hopping over these buildings to follow this big one around, which isn't a challenge at all. Or you've got this one where the camera just goes absolutely insane when you're trying to get between his legs or around his legs, and it's like, oh, I'm just going to swing around 180 degrees and hit you in the face with feet movements that shouldn't be physically possible. It kind of does that Dark Souls thing, but there are bosses in Dark Souls that do that, and I hate it when they do that. Same sort of thing here. There is one other thing that I've got about the main mode in this game. It's too easy. For the most part, anyway. The only time I actually died was towards the end of the game, where I needed to use gold orbs on like the last couple of bosses, and that was about it. And they gave me like 16. They give you one every time you log in every day, and I played the game a few times, but I still found like 10 gold orbs in the main stages without even trying. I think they give you a little bit too much. It's not like Devil May Cry 3. Where you really do need to work out your personal skills in order to beat it. Nah, you can just kind of spam it, and that's it. It'd be nice if you were only able to use, like, say, 1 gold orb per try to really get you to try and work up those skills. But no, you can use as many gold orbs as you like, not to mention red orbs. But I don't know why you would give up any red orbs when upgrades cost so much anyway, so, yeah. My other problem with the way the content in this game is laid out is that all of it's locked, for the most part, when you start out. You don't get access to the bloody palace, you don't get access to the hard difficulty, you only get access to the super hard difficulty, and you don't even get access to Virgil. Actually, that's kind of a lie. You can play through the main game as Virgil, but it means you have to go through the really boring story missions again. I played through as Nero, Dante, and V through the first few missions and barely died. I was doing surprisingly well, but then I thought to myself, oh, am I really going to bother playing with Virgil? Nah, I'm not going to play with Virgil. And then you get to the bloody palace, and Virgil can't even go into the bloody palace. I don't know why. It just seems entirely unnecessary. So I didn't play as Virgil, because I didn't want to play him in the really boring prologue missions in order to actually get through to ones where I'd be able to see what he wanted to do, because I've already spent like 8 hours on this game, and I like to play Devil May Cry in bursts. It's not a game that I can play end on end for 50 hours straight. It's not my kind of game in that sense. So, yeah, I don't know why they insist on not letting you play with Virgil in the bloody palace. Tell you another thing I hate, the bloody palace. I really liked the implementation of the bloody palace in Devil May Cry 3, where you have the ability to choose what floor you go to next and how high you go in the floors, so that your experience can be a little bit different every time. So if you have a little bit of trouble with one route, you think, oh, I'll try another route. I'll see if I can avoid this boss. I'll see if I can get I'll see if I can get something that's more beneficial to my playstyle when it comes to the enemy layout. But in this version of the bloody palace, it's just the same stages, end on end. You do the same stages over and over to the point where it keeps track of how fast you do all of them, with a constantly ticking clock. And you also, if you die once, that's it, you're done. So you end up in a position where you play through the first 19 stages and they're all really bloody easy. And then you come up to the first boss, which... Excuse me, a little bit of indigestion. Then you come up to the first boss. And the first boss is, whatchamacallit? The first boss is the same first boss that you fight in the main game, but they made him way fucking harder. So I ended up having to fight him like 3 or 4 times. You do have the ability to go and practice in the bloody palace stages that you've seen up to that point, but I feel like it's not really relevant, because I played the bloody I played the bloody palace with Nero, right? And you only get a certain set of opportunities to refresh your devil arms. So you can only pick up a certain amount at a certain time. And you wouldn't get that free choice when you're playing through the bloody palace normally and end up needing to fight Mr. Big Boss. So, yeah, it just felt kind of unfair to me to play it that way, so I didn't play it that way. But that also means that if I ever want to try to get any further than stage 20 in the bloody palace, I have to play the same 19 boring ass stages again. And then I have to bang my head against the wall of the boss they made purposefully harder. And I just don't want to do that, because I've got 2 choices in that regard. You can't earn more than a certain amount of upgrades from Bloody Palace. You have to go and find them in the story mode, which means I have to go and play through missions I've already played, looking for unlockables that are obviously quite well hidden, in order to give myself the best chance possible at the Bloody Palace. And I really don't want to do that. They have a way around this, but it's real money microtransactions. Still not a fan of this approach. I wasn't a fan of this approach when they did it on the special edition of Devil May Cry 4. I wasn't a fan when they did it in the Devil May Cry reboot, which I actually liked the combat of, if only it wasn't so over-the-top stupid with how profane and disgusting it was. Maybe it would have done better, but man, the structure of the game lets down the quality of the gameplay from moment to moment, I think, is my main takeaway from the special edition of Devil May Cry 5. I just wish there were so many things that were tweaked to make it a little bit more streamlined, make it a little bit more easy for me to max out everything I need to, then really start taking on the hard challenges. Let me play as Virgil in the bloody palace, for fuck's sake. Why wouldn't you let me do that? Doesn't make any sense. and just make the levels a little bit less easy. Make it a little bit more of a natural difficulty curve. Don't make me go up to the higher difficulty in order to really be challenged right off the bat. I don't know. It's just weirdly paced, and I'm just not as satisfied as I was in the 4 or 5 times I've tried to play Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition, and I still have never managed to finish that game because I'm an idiot. But I'm going to have to give it a try one of these days, aren't I? I'm going to have to go and grab the PC version of it and give it another shot. But that will not be today. So, just overall, in my ramble of Devil May Cry 5, Nero is great. Dante is a bit outside of the stuff that's tried and true, is just not that impressive. V gets the short end of the stick basically everywhere, and I don't really like playing as him at all. The Bloody Palace sucks. The story missions are a bit and it's only all held up by the quality of the combat, which is really good. I will point out the technical performance, because this is one of the 2 games that I'm aware of on PlayStation 5 as this is being recorded that supports 120 frames a second. I tried that mode because I had the ability to, and I honestly doubt it got over 95 at any particular point. It just wasn't that smooth. I don't know if it was a performance problem or not, but I just wasn't that impressed. And then I turned on the ray trace graphics, which make the game feel worse than 60 frames a second, and the game honestly doesn't look that much better. So, yeah, kind of a flop on this one. I mean, I can't say I'm surprised, because this is very clearly a PlayStation 4 generation game on the PlayStation 5, but it's just kind of disappointing that your first 120 frames a second showing can't even hit 100, at least from my eye. It might be a little bit different, but otherwise, I'm just not impressed. And yes, I'm 100% sure I plugged my PS5 directly into my monitor. It's even got a frame rate counter to show you what the frame rate is at, although it just sticks at like 60 or 120 or what have you, just to show you what your frame rate is at right now. And it's just not impressive. It really isn't. So, yeah. Overall, it's okay. I wouldn't recommend it outright. Wait for it to go on sale for like 20 bucks. It only starts out at 40 because it's a re-release, but yeah, I'd tell you to just wait for a sale. Or even better, get it on PC, because while you don't have the 120 frames a second mode, everything else from this version has basically been either modded in or added as DLC, and it probably goes on sale for a lot cheaper. So you might as well get it there. But otherwise, I'm just going to go back to Devil May Cry 3, or maybe I'll get around to trying Devil May Cry 4, but yeah. B+. Not massively impressed, but not massively impressed because of everything else, but the combat is still good. I'm going to shut up and let you watch the rest of this Bloody Palace footage, but I'm just going to warn you now, it's just kind of boring, because it's this new Bloody Palace, which isn't really that impressive. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time. Oh, and one more thing before we go. Devil Trigger is a really cool song. I will admit that. It's got some punch to it, and it really does fit the theme of the game a fair bit, but for some reason, they refuse to play it in this game in its entirety. And I don't know why. There are so many places that they could play this. They don't play it on the menu in its entirety. In the PlayStation 5 home screen, they play it if you hover over the game, but unless you're going to sit there and listen to Devil Trigger for 3 minutes, that's not going to be played in full. If you're playing it as Nero in combat, it's his combat theme, right? But it doesn't play in its entirety because the combat is over before you can actively hear the entire thing. And then when it starts playing in the credits, it doesn't even play the entire thing in the credits. It's so annoying. I had to go to YouTube to listen to this in full, and I was so annoyed at this. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but it just comes up over and over and over again. And you'll be sick of hearing that guy talking about opening his soul, or whatever he says at the beginning of Devil Trigger. You'll be hearing it that many times. So, yeah, just had to point that out.